Hi, my name's Mike Rash. Today we'll be doing a pre-trip inspection on a bus for a passenger vehicle. We're going to be inspecting the exterior of the vehicle first. Everything on the exterior, you verbally tell the tester what you're checking. Then we'll go inside and do the interior where you actually have to demonstrate everything on the inside. We'll start with the front of the vehicle, do the engine compartment, front axle on the driver's side. We'll continue doing the exterior from the driver door fuel area to the rear of the vehicle, also the underneath of the vehicle and the rear axle. And then we'll go inside and do the engine start, do the interior of the vehicle. I'd like to get started on the front of the vehicle. First, I'd like to inspect underneath the vehicle, make sure there's no oil, water, anything dripping underneath the vehicle, any leaks from the engine. I'd like to also check my lights. My light should be amber in the front, should be clean, securely mounted, not cracked. My headlight should be clear, clean, not cracked, securely mounted. And we'll go ahead and pull the hood and do the engine compartment. We'll start on the passenger side. We have a few things over here. My alternator is located right here. It's securely mounted. It's belt driven. My belt should have 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of tension. My belt should not be split or cut. My wires should be secure to the rear of my alternator. My bolts are tight, securing my alternator. Check this side of the engine for any leaks. Don't see any excessive leaks. I check my hoses on this side. All my clamps are tight. I don't see any rubbing on my hoses. Don't see any bulging hoses. I'll check my coolant up top here, make sure it's between hot and cold. And we'll go to the other side of my engine. I would inspect my water pump. My water pump is in the center here. It's securely mounted. It's not leaking. My bolts are tight. It's also belt driven. I would check my belt, make sure it's not split, cut, cracked. Check the tension on my belt, make sure it's between 1/2 to 3/4 inch of tension. I will check my air compressor. My air compressor is belt driven. I would check my belt, make sure it's not split or cut. Check the tension, make sure it's between 1/2 to 3/4 inch of tension on my belt. Make sure my air compressor is working properly, securely mounted, not leaking. I would check my power steering. I would check my dipstick, make sure it's between add and full. I would follow my lines down. They actually go to the other side of the motor. I would check my power steering pump over there, make sure it's securely mounted, not leaking. It's going to be gear driven. I would check this side of the engine for any leaks, no excessive leaks. I would check these hoses on this side of the engine. Other thing in my engine compartment is my oil. On this particular vehicle, the oil is checked from the inside. There's a doghouse that you lift up and check the oil, make sure it's between add and full. Continuing with my engine compartment, we have our steering box. I'll check to make sure my bolts are tight on that. It's not leaking, securely mounted, working properly. I would check my steering linkage, make sure it's straight. All my bolts and nuts are tight. It's not bent, broke, cracked. Check my tie rod, which goes to my other axle on the passenger side. Make sure it's straight. My bolts are tight on that. We'll continue with the axle. You want to check your suspension parts, your brake parts, and your wheel parts on each axle. We'll start with the suspension. I'll check my spring mount. Make sure my bolts are tight, my spring mount's not cracked, bent, broke. Have to check the front one and also the rear one on the back. I have my shock absorber. Make sure it's straight, not leaking, bolts are tight. I will check my U-bolts, make sure they're not shifted, my nuts are tight, they're not broke. And check my leaf springs, make sure they're in alignment, they're not cracked, they're not broken. Go on to my brake parts. I'll check my air line, make sure it's not leaking, make sure it's not cut, split, pinched. Check my fittings, make sure they're secure, not leaking. I'll check my brake chamber, single brake chamber, securely mounted with nuts. It's not dented, not leaking. My clamp is secure on it. I'll check my push rod. It's straight, it's not bent, not broke. Push rod should not travel over 1 inch when the brakes are applied. I'll check my slack adjuster. My pins are in place, it's straight, it's not bent, broke, cracked. Go to the inside of my wheel. I would check my brake drum. There's no cracks on my drum, no grease or oil, bolts are tight. I check my brake pads, make sure they're sufficient, at least 1/4 inch of padding, no grease or oil on those, they're not chipped. Go on to my tire. I would check my tread depth, make sure it's a minimum of 4/32 of tread depth. My tire wears even, no splits or cuts on my sidewall. I would check my valve stem, make sure it's straight, has a cap on it, not leaking, and I would check my tire pressure with a gauge. I would check my rim, no cracks on my rim, no illegal welding on my rim, make sure it has a good bead to my tire. Check my lug nuts, making sure all of them are tight, none missing, no signs of rust indicate they might be loose. Check my axle seal, make sure there's no leaking from my axle seal, no missing bolts on that. That is actually Form A of the test. We'll continue on with Form B, which we'll start from the other side of the vehicle. We're going to continue on with Form B. We're going to start with our mirror, make sure our bracket is not bent or broke, securely mounted. The mirror itself is not cracked, it's clean, securely mounted. Check any clearance lights that you have. They should be amber in the front, securely mounted, clean, not cracked. Check my door, make sure it opens and closes. Hinges are all secure, no bolts missing. Seal is not split or cut. Have another clearance light, should be amber, securely mounted, clean, not broke. Reflector, securely mounted, amber, clean, not broke. Continue on with our fuel tank. And check my fuel tank, make sure the straps are all secure. It's not leaking. Cap is secure, should have a seal and a chain on my cap. My fuel tank's not dented or rusted, securely mounted. Check underneath my vehicle. Underneath the vehicle, we have our drive shaft, should be straight. U-bolts, U-joints are secure. Bolts are tight, no debris in my U-joints. Carrier bearings, secure, all bolts are tight on those. I have my exhaust, which runs from my engine all the way to my rear of the vehicle. It's secure, all the clamps are tight, no signs of soot, it's not rusted, all securely mounted. Check my frame rails are straight, they're not cracked, broke, no holes. All my cross members in between my frame rails are securely mounted, not bent or broke. Continue on, we have a cargo area. It should open and close. My hinges are secure, my handle secure. Reflector is clean, amber, securely mounted, not cracked. Same thing with my amber light up here, clean, secure, not cracked, amber in color. We'll continue on with our rear axle. Rear axle's hard to see on this. We still have to check our suspension parts, our brake parts, and our wheel parts on this. We'll start from the outside and work our way in. I'll start with my axle seal. All my bolts are tight, my nuts are tight, no leaking. My lug nuts, none missing, all tight, securely mounted, no signs of rust. My rim, no cracks on my rim, no welding on my rim, has a good bead to the tire. My valve stem is straight, has a cap on it, not leaking. I would check my tire pressure with a tire gauge. I'll check for splits or cuts on my sidewalls, no bubbles. My tire's evenly worn. My minimum tread depth should be 2/32 of an inch on my rear tires. I would check in between my tires, make sure there's no debris in between my tires and that my rims are flush together. We'll work our way into our suspension. I have a spring mount in the front. I have a spring mount in the rear. Bolts are tight on those. Spring mount themselves aren't bent, broke, or cracked. My springs are not shifted. They're not cracked. They're not broken. Holding my springs to my axle are my U-bolts. They're straight. They're not shifted. My nuts are tight on those. I have a torque arm underneath my springs. My bushing is not ripped or torn. My bolts are tight. My torque arm is straight, not bent, broke, or cracked. I have a shock absorber on the rear on top of my axle that is straight, not leaking. Bolts are tight. In my brake parts, I have my brake chamber. It's a double brake chamber, securely mounted. My band is on tight. It's not leaking. Airline goes into my brake chamber. They're not pinched. They're not leaking. My fittings are secure. My push rod comes out of my brake chamber. My push rod should not travel over 1 inch with the parking brakes released. My slack adjuster is straight. Pins are in place. It's not bent, broke, cracked. Inside of my tires, I have my brake drums. No cracks, no illegal welds, no fluid, bolts are tight. And my brake shoes should be sufficient, at least 1/4 inch, no grease or oil, they're not chipped. That completes the axle. We'll continue on with the reflective tape. It's all the way down the side of the vehicle. It's clean, it's not peeling. Any reflective tape, we have to check that. Continue to the rear of the vehicle. Got our red reflector, it's not cracked, securely mounted, clean. And our red clearance light, securely mounted, clean, not cracked. The rear of the vehicle, we have a door. The door should open and close. Hinges, no bolts missing, secure. The seal is not ripped or torn. No holes in the door, no cracks in the door. Glass, clean, no cracks, not missing. Have our lights. They should be red in the rear, securely mounted, clean. And we have our reflective tape. It's not missing, it's clean, not peeling. And our reflectors, red, clean, securely mounted, not cracked, either one. That completes Form B. We'll go inside and do the in-cab inspection, which is necessary on both Form A and Form B, and also for full form. First thing on the passenger vehicle is our entryway. My steps are clean, not cracked, no trip hazards. My railing secure, handrail secure, bolts are tight, it's not bent, broke. We'll get in our bus. We'll check our passenger items on our bus. First thing is we check our seats. They're securely mounted to the floor. They're not bent, not broke. And we check this all the way to the rear. Next thing we're going to check is our emergency exits. They should be labeled. They should open and close, work properly. We have one in the rear, we have two in the ceiling, we also have two on the sides. All of them should be labeled properly. They should open and close. Buzzer comes on when we open these emergency exits. Okay, we'll do an engine start on the interior of the vehicle. We have an automatic transmission. We're going to make sure we're in neutral here. Our parking brake's applied. We're going to crank our vehicle, let the gauges cycle through. We'll start up. First thing I'd like to check is my oil pressure. Make sure my needle working properly, it's operating. Check my water pressure gauge, make sure my needle works, that it's reading properly. Check my voltmeter, make sure my needle raises, make sure it's working in the green. Check my air pressure, make sure that it's rising. It should reach governor cutoff, and it should also purge when it reaches governor cutoff. I'd like to check my safety and emergency equipment. They are my fully charged mounted fire extinguisher, 3 red reflective triangles, and spare fuses or breakers. This takes fuses, which are located up here. I'd like to check my horn, make sure my horn works. I'd like to check my heater, make sure my heater blows. Make sure my defroster blows on the windshield. I'll check my windshield wipers, make sure that they work properly. Make sure that they squirt fluid. Make sure my rubber's not split or cut. My metal arms aren't bent or broke on my windshield wipers. I'll check my lighting. That purge was just my air gauge reaching governor cutoff. I'd like to check my lighting indicators. My left arrow should be blinking. My right arrow should be blinking. My 4-ways, both arrows should blink. And also my high beam indicator should work on my dash. I'd like to check my mirrors, make sure my mirrors are clean, not cracked. They should all be in adjustment so I can see down to the rear of the vehicle. Check my windshield, make sure my windshield's clean, not cracked. No stickers to obstruct my view. I would like to check my seat belt. My seat belt should be mounted properly. Should also have no splits or cuts on my seat belt, and it should also latch to secure me. Okay, we've reached governor cutoff. We're going to check our parking brake, which must have full pressure governor cutoff when you start this. Check your parking brake. But my parking brake is applied. I'll put the vehicle in gear and drive. Press on the accelerator. Make sure my parking brake is holding, that we do not move. Next thing, I'd like to check my service brake. What I do for my service brake, I put it in gear, release my parking brake, I push that in. We're going to travel approximately 5 miles an hour. We're going to hit the foot brake, make sure the wheel doesn't pull left or right, and that I have a good pedal. Third thing we're going to do is our air brake check. Which is a pass-fail item on the test. Must do the air brake check correctly or else it's automatic fail. There's 3 parts to the air brake check. One where we check for air leaks. The second where we check the lower warning device. Third part is checking to make sure my parking brake's going to pop out. Okay, my tank's just purged. I'm at governor cutoff, maximum pressure. What I'm going to do is shut my engine off. I'm going to push in my parking brake, release my parking brake, and I'm going to apply my foot brake. Keep steady pressure on that. I'm going to watch my air gauge, make sure that I do not lose more than 3 pounds of air pressure in 1 minute. I got a timer here. We're going to start that. I'm also going to listen for air leaks outside my vehicle, make sure I do not hear any leaks, make sure I do not see any leaks. We're going to hold it for a full minute. Must hold it for the full minute, or else that would be automatic fail. Okay, we've held it for the full minute. Second part of the air brake check, checks your low air warning device. Low air warning device works off electric. I must have my key on for that. Some vehicles, the air gauge actually works off of the key. This one did not, so I must have my key on for the low air warning device. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pump my brake pedal. 60 pounds. My low air warning device should come on. Between 20 and 40, my parking brake should pop out automatically. The other part of the pre-trip inspection would be my lights, my exterior lights. I would like to make sure that my headlights work, my left and right turn signal, four ways on my clearance lights work on my front of the vehicle. Down the side of my vehicle, I'd make sure all my clearance lights work properly. On the rear of the vehicle, I'd make sure my left and right turn signal, four ways, brake lights, and clearance lights work properly on the rear of my vehicle. The tester can help you do lights. That concludes the pre-trip inspection. I hope this helps you when you study. Pre-trip inspection is very important. Make sure your vehicle is safe to drive. Also checking maintenance items. Thank you very much. Drive safe.